welcome to the Confident Parenting Connection. My name is Dawn Gibson, and I help you see and own your values so you can manifest the life and relationships that you desire. And today I have a guest with Conversations That Connect, Kamalo Gaskin. And we're going to be talking about the different structures all around the world that are in place for new moms when they give birth, and how important it is for us to really look at what moms need after they've had a baby. Because in different countries, such as the US, we tend to not focus on moms in the way that other countries do. And so she has a lot of wisdom to share in this area. So I want to thank you for being here, Kamala.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
And she has an amazing bio. And so I'm just going to go ahead and read straight from it because I want to make sure I get every bit of it so you know exactly who we're talking to. But Kamalo Gaskin is a founder of birthtobirth.com, a platform for becoming mothers to bring thought, curated resources, and inspiration to women and those who love them, wherever they are. She accompanies women and men through their birthright of passages. She went from a background in anthropology into contemporary arts curation. She was invited to speak on expectation versus realization at the Institute of Contemporary Arts in London for Pecha Kucha Nights. Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. After a spontaneous unassisted home birth, she became fascinated by childbirth physiology and the legacies of this experience in human cultures. With utter fascination, she completed a human physiology course through Duke University's medical school, cell biology, and received a certificate of distinction for her participation. She co-founded the Fearless Birth California Film Festival and fund for providing childbirth choices to all families. Through developing Doula's UK organization, she joined a network of passionate birth workers where she was introduced to the work, interviewed and studied with legendary obstetrician Dr. Michel Odent in his Paramana doula sessions. She writes on these topics as a contributor to the Huffington Post. She creates practices to ritualize this knowledge, to shift the broader birth narrative for humanity as a whole, to reflect more optimal birth legacies for generations to come. The name of her work, Birth to Birth, illustrates this legacy and aims to improve the collective memory of birthing our children as well as new mothers and fathers. And I have to say, just reading that, I get chills because I am all about creating new legacies and breaking old patterns and helping moms in that way. And birth is also very important to me as well, and women having birth choices. And so I would love to hear your story and how this came to be and what brought you down this path.
Right. So to start off, I think I mentioned that I had my daughter in 2008. I was living in London. I became pregnant in London, was working in completely different field, unrelated to birth, contemporary art and textiles and lots of soapboxes, as you say. And then I moved to the US to have my daughter, which is where I'm from. But when I got there, I just realized that I just entered a completely different system on the medical, or in terms of health insurance and coverage and support for new parents or pregnant people. But on the other hand, the resources that you have and the access to really interesting midwives and other kind of birth professionals was incredible. And a lot of different options were there. With my anthropology background, I kind of went deeper into it because I wanted to see why there was a different culture around birth in different places, but it didn't, my real kind of deep interest didn't really develop until after my daughter was born. So long story short, my daughter, after preparing for birth for months and trying to get back into a U.S. medical system where I would get coverage for my birth, I ended up having an unassisted home birth. It wasn't planned, but it was my vision. It was the thing that I wanted to move towards. And in the end, it just happened exactly as I wished it to. And fortunately, everything fell into place, my support systems, everything. And a few years after my daughter was born, I moved to Germany, where I am now, and I had my second son. And I had a home birth in Germany. And then I got a chance to kind of see the different systems that are in place for both here, the UK, and in the US. And I started to think, okay, why are there different systems in place for something that's a universal human experience?
Right.
And this sort of led me into more and more research. And then, as I said before, I entered doula work, which is how I call it, because a good friend of mine was a doula, and she always kind of pushed me in that direction. And I was resistant for a long time. And then when I accepted it, it was just beautiful, because it was my calling. It got me closer to this work. And then eventually, as I said, I came across Michel Odent's work and just wrote him and got in contact with him, went to meet him, and started getting deeper into this work and starting to see what are assumptions and myths around birth and what we actually know at this point.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I would love it if you would just take like 1 minute to talk a little bit about what is so special about Michel Odent's work, and just for people, just to give just kind of a broader perspective of really what we're going into here.
Okay, right. So I found his name referenced in lots of books from the whole spectrum, from obstetricians to shamanic midwives. So it was kind of interesting that the same name is appearing everywhere. And what I realized is that he's an 84-year-old surgeon by training from France. And he just coincidentally ended up in this work because in his early years, in his training to become a surgeon, he was put into a birth unit, a delivery room, and he just started observing. And then pretty soon he was asked to do C-sections when they were introduced. And then at some point, C-sections in the 50s and 60s started becoming very popular. He then started to look at some point, he started developing or doing research into the C-section, and started introducing this procedure that makes C-sections elective, or easier to be an elective process, because it caused less need for recovery after. So then he became an obstetrician and kind of fell into this work, and at some point met someone, I think, who had a phobia of hospitals. So he had to go do a home birth with her, or he was invited to. And then he saw the spectrum of birth, and then he wrote many books. I think at the moment it's about 22.
Wow, I didn't realize.
Research books.
Amazing.
On everything from hormones. He's kind of coined the term the hormone of love, which referring to oxytocin. Right. He's a bacteriologist, so he looks at the microbiome and the bacterial environment that a child is introduced to in an optimal birth situation. And then he looks at something that I find very interesting, is culturally how we don't have any records or we don't have much practice to refer to when it comes to unassisted or undisturbed births, as he says, because something else completely can happen to us when our birth experience is undisturbed.
Yes. But, when we allow our bodies, you know, I mean, I come from both sides of it, right? I had 3 home births, and I initially was going to birth in the hospital because insurance paid, and my husband was like, well, hey, you know, why don't we do this? But then everything inside of me was feeling like this doesn't feel like the choice for me. It just did not align or resonate with me at all. And so at 30 weeks, I switched to a licensed midwife. And and so I was surprised she took me that way, but she did. And my pregnancy went really well. And so I ended up having my daughter at home and water. So I had water births with my daughter and my son. And then my third one was not born in water, but she was also born at home. And I was transferred to the hospital after my first birth. My placenta didn't release. And it's like you were saying, you know, you said you envisioned your birth being just that way. And even though it wasn't planned, it was a vision created as well. Just like I was worried my placenta wasn't going to come out, and guess what? It didn't. And so I was rushed to the hospital, and then working at the hospital, I wasn't rushed to the hospital, but I went to the hospital. Everything was fine. It eventually worked, but I feel like, and then working in the hospital, I was able to see what happens sometimes with women who even want to birth naturally in the hospital at the time that I was working in the hospital.
Right.
And it was not supported at all. Like undisturbed birth and birth and allowing the woman to work with her baby and her body, women were seen as crazy. I mean, I heard all kinds of things said by staff, you know, and so, and I didn't tell a lot of people I was a home birther because the stigma attached to it, right? And it's dangerous. And so, but then there's also that, you know, I know emergencies happen. And so there's this, and then some women are higher risk, but I really want to get to what you were talking about, which is the structure and the differences and how birth is treated and how the postpartum time is treated and how moms and dads are treated in different countries. And what have you noticed? I mean, what have you seen?
Right. This is really interesting because I mean, I can start with just an example from today. I have one of my doula clients had a baby a few months ago, and she's been nursing, but she had to go back to work. And she got a breast infection, like mastitis or thrush, sorry. And this is something that when you don't have your rhythms together with breastfeeding, your body responds to it. And in the early kind of first year of your baby's life, there's all these kind of rhythms that you have to, and rituals that you have to have time to adjust to, because otherwise you get overwhelmed. And in her case, she got really sick. I mean, the infections, they're very treatable, but they just kind of disable you. And in Germany, where I am, there's a very low birth rate. And it's the same in Japan. It's in Japan, I think it was around 1% or something, very low. I need to check the numbers, but I'll just say very low, around 1%. And also in Germany, that's been the case for quite a long time. And because of this, both of those countries are interested in introducing policy to support women to work, because that's what our societies, or at least those societies, are really work-centric societies.
Right.
And on the other hand, they need to create an optimal environment for people to actually want to have children. And what we have in Germany is one member of government, a woman, decided or kind of realized that there are all these programs in place to kind of help encourage women to have babies, or family, women and couples to have babies. So you have subsidized childcare, you have from a very young age, you get paid something called parents' money every month.
Wow.
For having a baby until the child is graduated from college.
Wow.
In the first year to 14 months of a child's life, and they're extending this and making it more flexible, you get another subsidy and cash in your bank account to support babies. And then there's this one program called the Welcome Trust here, where before you have access to all these programs, we realized that in that fourth trimester, the first 40 days, I'll say, after birth, women are usually, their bodies are adjusting, their hormones are returning to balance, their bodies are getting back into, they're just getting used to this new place, physically, spiritually, emotionally, everything. Their relationships they're figuring out their
everything shifting.
Everything. So she created this trust to get people who have experience with babies. They don't have to be hired. They just have to be interested in being there to provide conversation or this bridge for new mothers. So someone comes to your house and just is there. And this is great for people who are very mobile, like me, who's living in foreign countries for the last 20 years almost. And and so that's one.
That was a postpartum doula for me. After my son was born, I had a postpartum doula come because I didn't have the support that I have family here, and they're super supportive. So it's not that I didn't have their support, but in order to have someone come to my home, like most of the time I would go to my family's home to get help. And so it was nice having like the first 6 weeks of somebody just helping me cook some things and just to talk to and cry and whatever was happening, if I was feeling overwhelmed. And I feel like that's such an important piece. And my midwife, of course, came to my home over a period of time as well to come check on the baby and make sure everything was going.
Yeah. And I've come to understand that midwives do tons. And they're kind of, in some cases, kind of overworked or they have a lot that they have to do. So doulas actually do play a really great role in covering the things that midwives aren't able to do. So it's a very great kind of professional partnership, although I don't consider doulas a profession. And that's also something that I agree with Michel Odent's approach, that when we get some professional, this kind of work, doulas are there to kind of protect the space of the woman as she becomes a mother, but also in that postpartum period. And when they're systemized or kind of entering the system, they kind of lose that. They have to do something all the time. They have to have these kind of skills rather than just the essence of the person who's there, which is, this is an interesting side topic, but to come back to that role. In Germany, they don't have doulas as such because the midwifery field is really ingrained in the society. People have known it for hundreds of years, and even in the worst periods in Germany, they were protected in the law. So that's really important.
That is important.
But what I would like to talk about that part of the conversation we were planning to have is about one very important thing that I wish would be introduced everywhere else. In German, it's called the Mutter-Kind-Kur. And this means the mother-child retreat. And they also have the father-child retreat, where if you're going through a tough period, anytime in your parenthood, because the motherhood journey doesn't end after
6 weeks or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
A long journey. And there are very many interesting challenges that we're confronted with. And one is when we enter work, and there's a lot of overwhelm that happens, postpartum depression is something, post-traumatic PTSD for mothers, lots of different conditions that aren't spoken about enough. And also, I mean, I've had these really magical birth experiences, but it's also brought me into contact with a lot of people who haven't. And I feel like I want to embrace those stories because it's all, for me, it's about the greater narrative to get all of us to move in a direction where we take care of these stories, we take care of these experiences as well. So the Mutakinkor, the mother-child retreats, are a time where mothers can just go away to a beautiful remote retreat center, fully paid from their health insurance company, prescribed by their normal family doctor, GP, general practitioner. And you can go for a few weeks if you need. You can bring your child with you. You have childcare. You have a place to stay. You can get massage all day. You can get other types of therapies.
That's amazing.
It's incredible.
That's really amazing. It really is. Because I don't know how your journey has been, but, you know, I had a rough time the first couple of years. And after my kids were born, mainly after my second one, you know, because it was an adjustment having two. And I mean, I went out and got my own support, but I had to, you know, I was staying home and we were in a different financial position at that time. And so it was really a stretch for me to go pay someone to get that support, but I knew I had to. And just to think about these women who are so nurtured. And I feel like it's so important for us to be nurtured and nourished and just the picture you just painted of, you know, and still getting to stay connected with your child. Right.
Right.
And
exactly.
So it's not about disappearing, you know.
Right. Exactly.
It's for our children because our nervous systems are connected. And when we feel calm and relaxed, our children are. And when we feel anxious and depressed, our children receive that energy as well.
Exactly. And I think just to kind of connect some of these parts, the reason why I'm talking about Michel Odent's work is because we need more people to dedicate time to understanding, one, primal health, but also what happens after birth, how these births can cause a shift in our life, kind of a permanent kind of impression or sometimes trauma on our lives afterwards. And we really need time in our societies to dedicate to improving that situation. And I think what his work does is really look at what are the repercussions of some of the choices we make. And even though, for example, with Kaiser, sorry, I'm about to speak German. And I
did take German through high school college, but I don't know that I can have a conversation with you anymore.
Yeah. So yeah, even though cesareans are somehow, most people today don't really want to choose a cesarean, but it's okay if they have one, but we need to understand that some of our practices like inductions and things can lead quicker to these things.
Yes.
And it's not just a matter of like, I want a natural birth or I want to hurry this up and schedule it. It's not so black and white. It's more that these things have longer term impacts on our ability to get back into society, to function, but also to nurture our children, to be able to have them function in society at an optimal level as well. So I think, that we really would do ourselves a favor to get people to make policy to understand that these they seem small choices have a wider impact. Like, allow a woman a month off, it will have repercussions in the society in the future. And just looking in the long term, and I think places like Japan and Germany have no choice.
Right.
Because their populations are dwindling and they have to address it, or there's nobody, they're not going to have a population to sustain the economies that both of them are presenting to the world. So.
And that's really huge. You know? And there's so many different layers to this, because as you were talking, what I was noticing is, you know, one of the things I did when I used to practice psychotherapy. And so one of the ways I worked with women was on birth trauma. And so helping them heal. And what I loved about it was I could get them, usually they would come about 3 months after is when they started kind of realizing like this, what I'm feeling isn't right. But my doctor says it's fine, you know, and I feel like birth has become so medicalized here. And there actually are a lot of people who have elective C-sections, especially if they had one initially, because doctors here are concerned about, you know, liability, but then also because once you have a C-section, anyways, I know all of that's changed. That's a whole nother subject too, just about the risk to the mom and risk to the baby. And I think the major organization that determines all of those things is shifting their perspective on it. And I think it's more, I think VBACs might be okay in the hospital now, which is why a lot of women here choose to have VBAC home births, because sometimes in the hospital, they're not given that
allowed.
But so there's the trauma, right, of the mom, and we store trauma in our bodies. And so if that's not shifted, that is passed on to our children. And the thing is, the babies also experience that on some level too. And childbirth is hard work. It's not, I mean, they're coming through this little canal, you know, and it's hard for babies, and it can be challenging for moms as well. And then there's also what you were saying about, you know, if women could just spend that time with their babies, and that's the attachment piece. So that's the psychotherapy piece of the emotional attachment. All of that is it's more profound than we give it credit for, like really connecting and attaching and being with your baby and helping them know that they're safe, and being able to calm their nervous systems, and being able to connect in that way to set that foundation as they grow. So then they are more confident and are more, you know, it just has a whole host of, societal impact. I mean, so I love the idea of really, you know, this might seem like a very specific issue, but there's so many layers and aspects, and it's so broad.
Exactly.
But then how just changing one birth at a time will impact, it'll have a ripple effect, you know, in the postpartum period, and the mother-child, and the caring for mom and supporting mom and helping her heal if there's healing that needs to happen. Right. It's very, I mean, I love what you're talking about. I love this message you're spreading, and I really do. And I'm glad that somebody's doing it.
Right. Thank you. I mean, I have to say that there are, people who, I mean, once I started this, and the interesting thing is, I thought that I just had this particular path, and the more I got into it, I started finding people from all generations who've been doing this. And I was at a conference, the Yoni Fest in Canada in the summer, and I walked up to, or just had a conversation with an older midwife there. And I was like, oh yeah, I would love to interview you and do a piece on the Huffington Post about your story and what you've just told. And she was like, well, I'm one of the people who chooses to be not in the limelight, because a lot of things, I mean, this birth it's such a huge, deep spectrum of things that happens, and she really finds it a sacred kind of experience that she's allowed to enter into, and I completely respect that. But it just occurred to me that I come into contact with so many people who aren't even interested in speaking publicly, but because I am, I just take the opportunity. And one more thing, what you said about the birth narratives, that's something I'm really interested in, the legacy, the birth legacy that carries on from generation to generation. And this is part of the name for my my platform, birthtobirth.com, because I'm looking at how it's a few things, but how one birth leads to the next, those stories bridge into the next generation, but also that you're birthing your child and then it leads to your own birth, which kind of ripples into other types of experiences that are rebirths as we go deeper into our motherhood experience. And I came upon a woman called Elena Tonetti Vladimirova, and she's one of these midwives who's, I mean, I would also call her a shamanic midwife. I don't know if she would use that word, but she was born in Siberia in Russia in the 50s. And she was looking at birth trauma and healing birth traumas. And she talks a lot about this as well. And when I found her, I was like, oh my God, somebody's speaking my language and kind of gone far into this further than I have myself. But it's really interesting to bridge these different sources of information and see how what they offer us. I'm quite open to these, to standing on the shoulders of others who've come before us.
That's awesome. I think that's amazing. And, one thing, I feel like with the word trauma, sometimes people feel like it has to be this massive thing that happened, like you almost died or your baby almost died. And I feel like trauma is so subjective, and it's really what the woman's experience of it was. And so for women who might be watching this right now, if they had a birth trauma, the sooner you can get help for that, the better. And if you haven't gotten help, there's still time, right? But
exactly,
as simple as the doctor having to put their hands inside of you to turn the baby, and that may have caused a physiological response and a hanging on to of that cellular memory, which might impact your ability to be intimate with your husband later. I mean, there's so many, or maybe your baby was taken to the nursery and you thought you were going to get to breastfeed right away, and that felt really vulnerable and upsetting, and you have that body memory as well, or you might have almost passed, or your baby might have been taken to the NICU. I mean, there's so many different levels of trauma, and I think it's important for women to understand that their story is valuable and it's important, and that there is support if they choose to grab it. And it would be amazing if every society would take the lead to really promote this idea and help put these systems in place to help our moms and to help, that need the extra support.
Right. Exactly. And I feel like we have so little information in this particular field of childbirth, which is very interesting because we have a lot of faith in what's happening. But I mean, the more I learn and the more I witness, I start to see that we are really ignorant about a lot of the practices we put in place. And I had just a short, quick story is a mother who had twins last week or the week before. She called me 2 weeks before her due date to say that she was in the hospital and they were preparing to induce her, but she was had no other reasons for induction. And then I didn't see her until last week, and I realized that they were just under the impression that you need to induce twins 2 weeks before, because their twins take longer or don't take as long. They're ready before, and a lot of it was kind of false assumption. And she did have this where the babies ended up being a little bit premature and one was separated from her in the hospital yeah, I mean, I don't blame anybody, but it's just kind of a general ignorance, and we have a lot of learning to do, and I think we just need to understand that and go to the sources of information wherever they are to get there. And I met an amazing obstetrician and midwife from Mexico who, in her hospital practice, teaches a ritual for postpartum depression. And it's also used for post-traumatic stress disorder in psychiatry
Oh, wow.
as well. And it's basically, you take the baby wrap, the kind of, I think people call it a Moby now. It has different names.
Yeah, there's different ones.
Cloth wraps. And you just kind of do a ritual to kind of wrap the woman's body from head to toe. As she breathes, you use herbs in the air or massage her with a certain oil to kind of calm her or kind of relax her. Mm-hmm. And you just go through this process to kind of wrap her up and give her closure in this experience, because even with the best, most magical birth experience, we're still open energetically, and we need something to kind of bring ourselves back together. And they, in Mexico and other parts of Latin and South America, and even in the southern US, they use this practice, and it's really just a given that we can go into places who have a more mature birth culture, where in the US and Canada, for example, midwifery was abandoned. So we lost a lot of knowledge. However, in Southern and Latin America, and even in Germany, it's more, the lineage hasn't been broken. So these little things are just, people know when they're practicing birth, midwives know that these are important, even though they seem trivial, these rituals.
I love rituals.
Yes. And they are humbling because they're so simple sometimes, but they
very powerful.
Exactly. And how do we deal with something like postpartum or postpartum depression or post-traumatic stress disorder? Usually is in itself, the treatments are a lot of times takes years and years and years, and we want to find simple things as well to invite into this experience.
Absolutely. So so on a smaller scale,
okay,
do you have a nugget or something that you can leave us with that a woman at home who is pregnant or who's considering having a baby, or maybe a woman who just had a baby, what they can do to contribute to this legacy and this shift in birthing? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm just wondering if there's one takeaway or one thing that you feel that, and even women who maybe have already had children, that we can do individually to help support your work and support what you're doing in the world and support other women.
Right.
This way.
Great question. Really great question. Well, one thing that I do in my work, I've actually just completed a course. It's called the Birth to Birth Immersion, and it is a rite of passage for becoming mothers and fathers. And one of the things that I do, one of the central, this is my daughter.
Kamala, es gäbe noch die Mauer.
I will come back in one second.
Ich wünschte, es gibt noch die Mauer.
Yeah.
Aber man dürfte über die Mauer.
Okay.
Papa,
Okay. I'll translate that soon.
Don't translate it.
Okay. So what I would say, he wants to nurse.
Okay. See, perfect. This is perfect.
I am a mother.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah. So in the birth to birth immersion, one of the things that I really focus on is that when we go into any of these experiences, what we really need to know is that all of us have something that we really are here to fulfill. We have a purpose. Mm-hmm. And to understand your purpose, you have to follow the things that you're drawn to, even
Absolutely.
if it's just an instinct that tells you to go in a certain direction. And this comes into play during birth, because we know a lot more than we think we do.
Yes, we do. If we take the time to tune in, right?
Exactly. So what we can do is kind of give ourselves rituals where we sharpen that intuition and really pay attention to it. And one of the things that I do is take people through this rite of passage, I call it, so that they can really look at what it is their own medicine is. Even if it's humor, mm-hmm. if the thing that you have to offer the world is humor, then you have to get in a place where you can let that go, that comes out. And whatever your specific calling or something you're really interested in or good at, or you're just being drawn to it. If you want to be in a dark room when you're pregnant, for example, go for it. Because those feelings or those kind of magnetisms are pulling you there for a reason. Absolutely. And I think when we all kind of get used to that, mm-hmm. then we'll just see a ripple effect happen. I mean, this is where we can start on the personal, mm-hmm. but I think as we go deeper into this as institutions, mm-hmm. we can start understanding that we can listen to other people's intuitions and be able to serve them based on what they're telling us about their situation.
Absolutely. And I agree 100% with that. And I know with my last child, I read a book called Spirit Babies before I had her. And it was all about connecting to the spirit of your baby before and calling her in. And there's a chapter on shamanic birth. And it was really about we're the birth shaman and we can do this. And I feel like that time I trusted myself more than any time. And I wanted to sit in a dark room by myself, whereas with the first birth, I was telling my husband, don't leave me, mm-hmm. like, please stay awake, don't leave, and so it's really fascinating when we do really just tune in to our bodies and tune into what we desire and what we want and follow that, then we're all living from joy and we're living from this place of alignment and beauty and love. And that just ripples, it just has this ripple effect and it's really mm-hmm. amazing. Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I read that book.
Yeah, you're the second person that I trust who recommends it. So
it's so good.
I will definitely.
It's a really good book.
I will definitely get it.
Well, I just really want to thank you and honor you for taking this time. I know you're with your family tonight, and it was your son's birthday, and we got little visitors, which was really always nice. And I know you mentioned it a couple times, but I really do want you to let people know where they can find you.
Okay, so my website is birthtobirth.com, and you can also find me on facebook.com/birthtobirth.
Okay.
Pinterest /birthtobirth. Okay. And I think my Twitter tag is also birthtobirth.
Okay, that's very easy to remember.
Right, and it's the word birth and then 2 and birth again.
Awesome.
My name is Kamalo Gaskin.
Kamalo Gaskin, thank you so much for being here. And then you can also visit my website at dawnkgibson.com to pick up your 10 kick-ass ways. Sorry, I know you have kids to raise self-confident and connected kids. And thank you so much. I'm sending you so much love, and I really appreciate your time today and your wisdom that you shared today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dawn.